The apartment smelled of rot, of chemicals, of something so unbearably wrong that even seasoned officers hesitated. Inside, a young man, barely conscious, marked by his fragile state. The man who brought him here smiled quietly, calm, polite, even helpful to the strangers at the door. The character had convinced the authorities that everything was consensual. The visitors left, leaving the boy in solitude. And within hours, the mystery deepened. An event that had gone unnoticed in plain sight, this single moment would become emblematic of a horror that had quietly unfolded over years. A horror that had gone unnoticed in plain sight. Behind ordinary doors, he had always been quiet, almost invisible. But that invisibility was a mask. Born in a different time, he moved through childhood and adolescence like a shadow, solitary and peculiar, collecting bones, arranging them meticulously. He was polite in school, awkward yet unthreatening. Inside, his mind churned with obsessions that blurred life and death. By the time he settled into Milwaukee, neighbors noted odd smells, quiet hums. To them, he was unassuming. To those he encountered, he was an enigma waiting to unfold. The first encounters were initiated with an ease that now seems impossible to reconcile. Money, drinks, companionship, a handshake, a smile was enough to gain their trust. For some actions were not chaotic or impulsive. They were rehearsed, precise, driven by an insatiable need to control, to possess, to preserve. Some victims were photographed, some dismembered, some reduced to jars and skulls, each act a fragment of a curiosity that had grown into fascination. Every time a new event occurred, faint odors and whispers circulated in the neighborhood, unnoticed or dismissed, evidence that would only become horrifying in retrospect. One incident in particular exposed both his cunning and the failures of those tasked with protection. A young individual was seen fleeing, dazed and distressed. The officers arrived. The man explained calmly that everything was under control. Officers saw a confused individual and a man who appeared responsible, and they left, sending the individual back into the apartment that would become his confinement. Within hours, the situation escalated dramatically. The tragedy was compounded by a system blind to bias, manipulation, and coercion. The chronology of these events reveals an increasingly complex pattern. He observed those who seemed isolate, often overlooked. The approach was calculated. Initial friendliness, the offer of a drink. Careful observation, incremental control. Each act reinforced the illusion of safety, while tightening the cage around his victims. With each new body, Dahmer refined his approach, learned to navigate social structures, and exploded the failures of law enforcement and social services alike. When the truth was finally revealed, it was not by chance. Tracy Edwards fled the location, terrified, flagging down help, forcing them into Dahmer's lair. What they discovered was incomprehensible. Photographs of dismembered bodies, bones and skulls preserved in jars, the odor of decay heavy. Each item told a story of terror, manipulation, and obsession. Psychologically, Dahmer represented an extreme form of pathological compulsion, a mind seeking control over chaos. Victims were chosen for their vulnerability and their lack of self-control. Victims were chosen for their vulnerability and uniqueness, reflecting biases in society. Trust was weaponized, compliance chemically induced, and the terror prolonged. Each encounter was a step in the rehearsal of control. The investigation revealed painful truths about institutional failures. Reports of suspicious behavior, all were previously ignored. This incident became a deafening moment, exposing how bias, procedural complacency, and failure to understand psychological coercion allowed a killer to continue unimpeded. Dahmer's ability to manipulate these systems was as frightening as the acts themselves. As the trial unfolded, the nation confronted a cognitive dissonance between the polite, soft-spoken man and the unsettling events that had transpired. The accounts were chillingly detailed. Families of victims listened in disbelief as the reality of drugs, subjugation, dismemberment. The courtroom was a stark confrontation between human complexity and ordinary frameworks of morality. Convicted of 15 murders, Dahmer received life imprisonment without parole. His crimes continue to echo through the corridors of criminal psychology, law enforcement training, and collective memory. The young men he killed are remembered not just for their deaths, but for the lives that might have been.